We'll do it memory informed. Let's see, how much time do we have? I think we have a little more time. 1 minute. So maybe we could talk soon, Miss Marilyn Sprick. All right. And okay, so welcome. I'm going to ask you to keep muted and to also turn off your cameras for this moment, just so that we don't have other things that people's attention can go to when we're talking about cognitive load theory. So let's see if we could do that. And all right, thank you for joining me on this April 5th, 2022. And yes, it is my 75th birthday. And I am just so blessed to utilize this day to talk about cognitive load. And so many people, a few people many have given me birthday wishes today, but a few people said, I just can't at this moment come on for this webinar, so I will get it remotely. And remember, they're always available to you. And we'll be sending out that link again to you so that you can do just exactly that. If you want to use the videos or the webinars, if you want to watch it at another time, it is available. So I titled this, Let's Talk About Cognitive Overload, Addressing Intrinsic and Extraneous Cognitive Load. And here's how this came about. First of all, I was asked to do a podcast with a wonderful person, which is Orville Lovell. And he asked me to do a podcast on explicit instruction. And we talked a great deal, and we both realized that his work in cognitive load theory and my work on explicit instruction had some matches. So that was one thing that led me to this. And this is his book. And, you know, every year I pick a book that informs me beyond what I knew. And this is my choice for this year, particularly the instructional design portions, which are the researcher's Sweller. This was using his theory and putting it into practice by Oliver Lovell. So, and so that was one thing that said to me, oh, I better do a webinar on this. But then here's the second thing. I have teachers again and again asking me, how does explicit instruction relate to brain theories? Brain theories. And I said to them, well, it directly relates to what we know about memory, thus what we know about learning. Because if you learn something, it moves from your working memory to your permanent memory. So we are definitely in line with that, quote unquote, brain research, which is really memory research. But then here's the next thing. Over the course of the pandemic, I've had the great gift of watching more than 200 videos of teachers teaching. And often I've stopped and said to myself, well, it appears the challenge is there's just too many things that the students need to attend to that are taking their attention away from the content of the lesson. And let me just describe one of them that recently I watched. So the students were third graders. They were in a math intervention group, and they were learning add-ins to 10 so that they would be able to figure out the missing add-in if the sum had to be 10. So the students sat down and the teacher said, we're going to play a game and you're going to get a card. And the card, she showed a card, will show an equation where there is a missing add-in, like 9 plus blank equals 10, or 1 plus blank equals 10. And those are pairs because 9 plus 1 equals 10. Okay, so we're going to deal out a card to you, and you're going to have it in front of you. And then you get to draw a card and turn it over. And if it is the partner, then you get to keep the card. And we'll play the game for a while, and the person who has the most cards are going to win. And I watched this and I realized that the students did not have a strategy for figuring out what the missing add-in was. So that the teacher had to help them on each item to figure out, well, if they had a matching card or if they didn't. And I just sat there and thought to myself, we want them to learn how to figure out the missing add-in. But in this game, they had to figure out what was on the cards. They had to watch what their teammates at the table had on their cards. Then they had to match 2 cards together to make a partnership, a mountain, which they were being taught. And there were so many things they had to think about, and covered very few items. And I don't think they had any growth in a strategy for figuring it out. And I said to myself, wow, that is a perfect example of cognitive load, where you really had too much information coming in and couldn't focus on the critical one. So we're going to explore this today, and I find it's useful to you because if you are working with teachers in terms of utilization of the big ideas of explicit instruction, they often will ask you the same question I often get: how does this relate to brain theory? And you start by saying, well, it relates definitely to what we know about memory and how we process information. So start with that. So the PowerPoint, I have to admit, because it is my birthday today and my sister and her husband was with me over the weekend, I had to send this PowerPoint late to Safe and Simple Schools. So it's in the chat box, and Nick's put it there, and also it will be available, sent out to you. So you'll have it. But I do recommend that you read this book, and the very last slide also has a webinar that Oliver Lovell did on cognitive load theory. So it originated with the work of a team, but also an author, John Sweller. And what Oliver wanted to do was to give more practical examples that would be useful to teachers. Some of it would be very useful to the roles you're in. Some of it would be more useful because it's often been researched with college students looking at it from that perspective. But it's interesting. So you've got the book and you've got the webinar that he did that would be most enjoyable for you to watch. All right. Now, one of the suggestions in the book is having bulletproof definitions when you introduce knowledge and concepts. And I think I'm going to try this out. So this one is sort of a summary of what we're going to cover. Please read it to yourself. So we're going to look at this through the lens that we know, which is the elements of explicit instruction and how they are designed to optimize intrinsic load, what the students are meant to learn, and to minimize anything that might take their attention away from that critical learning. So everything we're going to talk about directly relates to this bulletproof definition. Well, no matter what, our goal is always the same, and it is learning, 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 more learning, more learning, more learning. And also, of course, the relationship of teaching to that learning, because we know how we teach directly relates what the students learn. And so we're always interested in, what do I need to look at in my teaching to ensure learning? What do I need to watch in my teaching to ensure learning? So we're just going to look at through a little bit different lens so that you'll know how to respond when people say, how does this relate to brain research? So we're going to relate it to the memory. What do we know about memory? The first part of this book is about the relationship of memory to learning, and basically says that we need to look at memory system in terms of three things: the environment, long-term memory or permanent memory, and working memory, those three. Okay, so the environment. We have huge environments of knowledge and information. I mean, everything that's outside of our brain supports memory. We could watch a video, we could go online, we could have books and books and more books at the Archer House. We could read journals, we could read magazines, we could listen to other informed experts, we could listen to teachers. There's lots in the environment that supports our memory. I have to tell you, I'm using more and more external sources to support my memory as time goes by. And luckily, I have a whole library of books ready to go. I have the internet, I have videos, I have teachers like Marilyn Spricks on today, and she's always taught me many things. So we have the environment, and then, and it is unlimited. Particularly, I mean, what can't we learn by getting books and videos and internet and so forth, and experts to teach it to us? But then we have long-term memory, and that is exactly what it means. That's where all of our memories are kept. And I have to tell you, around your 75th birthday, you have a lot of memories of life events. My sister spent the weekend here, and I got those events. But also, it's where we store how to do something, process and strategies, which we directly teach, and vocabulary and concepts, what something is, as well as factual information, facts and knowledge about something that is critical to remember. So we just go about our entire life stuffing our long-term memory, if we have enough rehearsal and enough retrieval to remember it, in our memory. And so we have an external source of information, an eternal source of information. And I strongly believe that our job as teachers is to stuff children, stuff them with memories of processes, of vocabulary, of concepts, of facts. That is what this is about, is moving things to permanent memory, to long-term memory. But then we have the challenge, and that is, while long-term memory is unlimited in capacity, we have working memory where we do all of our thinking, where all of our thinking is done, And unfortunately, it is limited. So two aspects of memory are unlimited: the environment, our internal source of memory, but the working memory is limited. So over time, we've had many studies trying to figure out, well, how many things can we respond to in a moment? And it's gone from 4 up to 7, back to 5, but not, it's limited. And so this is a very useful thing even to teach children. Like if I was teaching 6th graders, I would teach them about our memory. And what do we need to know about it as teachers? Well, we have to understand intrinsic and extraneous cognitive load. Good concept for us to get down. Boy, if I used that recently in observing teachers teaching. So basically, the intrinsic cognitive load is what we want students to learn. What do we want students to learn? What do we want them to think about? And what do we want working memory to be occupied with? So that when I am teaching, I want the students to be thinking about what is the goal of the lesson? What am I supposed to learn? And keeping that working memory focused on that. In fact, that's what really good explicit instruction is good at, is keeping you thinking about what you need to learn. And it's basically thus what we teach. And extraneous cognitive load is anything that draws the student's attention away, takes it away from what we want them to be thinking about, takes it away from what we want working memory to focus on. And it's directly connected to how the information is presented, how we teach. Intrinsic, what we want them to learn. Extraneous, how we teach. Is there anything drawing their attention away? Well, what did the research on cognitive load theory come to conclude? Here's the big ideas. Read that one to yourself. Okay, so basically, let's say that we have this amount of space in our working memory. And it is, some things are intrinsic, what I'm teaching you, but also demands on memory are some things in how I'm teaching it. But if those two are more than the capacity of working memory, no learning is able to occur. And so said another way, if intrinsic load plus extraneous load exceeds the capacity of working memory, cognitive overload results. Now, I'm going to have you just say this to yourself. What is one time when you yourself have experienced cognitive overload? All right. So I'm going to use two examples from my own life, and I just wish I could hear all of yours because I know you have them. So one was when I was 18 and went to University of Washington, and I took Spanish class. Now I have dyslexia. I have a severe challenge of being able to process the phonemes that go with graphemes. I've mastered it in English, but there I am in Spanish. Now I took German in high school and I got A's because all the tests were written. I didn't have to speak it. I didn't have to hear it. I didn't have to understand spoken German. Okay, so then I went off to university and took the test, but in German, I had to take all the classes again. So I chose Spanish, but I was totally unable to process the sounds in Spanish. And I had cognitive overload every day in that course until I dropped it and took a statistics course, as I remember, which was an odd substitute. But I had an easier time learning that. So when I started cello, my teacher would say, now, Anita, that note is a D and you play it with this string and it's here on your notes. Wow. I had to use the memory of a new form of written music, which I play clarinet, which was written in a different one. And I had to hold, here's the note, here's how you play it. And then there's many different ways you could play a note. And so if you're doing it in first position or second position or third position, cognitive overload. And finally, I had to explain to Hamilton what was cognitive overload. So all of us have experienced that when this was our working memory, and the intrinsic load and the extraneous load was more than our working memory, and we experience cognitive overload. What we want to avoid with teaching children so that they don't get confused. That is the main outcome of cognitive overload, is confusion. Well, so here is the fundamental recommendation of this book, of the original book by Swaller, and read it with me. In order to increase learning, that's always our goal, optimize intrinsic load and minimize extraneous load. Well, I think this is actually what the elements of explicit instruction are designed to do. But I want to bring it to your attention and make you aware of this thinking as you're observing teaching, and observing it and asking yourself, are they optimizing the intrinsic load, what the kids are to learn? Are they minimizing what's extraneous that might take their attention away? So, optimize intrinsic load. Well, here's my question, and read it to yourself. Okay, so I want you to think about some aspect of explicit instruction that we might attend to that might increase and optimize what students are to learn. So think about it. So let's see if you had some of these ideas, and when we're done, you can add to it. So I went right to the elements of explicit instruction, those 16 elements that you learned in the original training, and basically said, well, we need to look at the curriculum. And what does the curriculum do that would optimize students' learning by optimizing the intrinsic load, optimizing their chance to learn the content? Well, the first thing I wrote down was it focuses on critical content. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff, so that the students already are honed in on something that is useful in the moment and useful in the future. That's one way we could optimize that intrinsic load. What are they supposed to learn? But we also have break down complex skills, strategies, and bodies of knowledge into smaller components. And following that with then sequence that instruction logically with easy things before more difficult, with high frequency before low frequency, teaching prerequisites first before similar skills, and having them separated. So you're going to have to forgive me for this, but I thought that one perfect example of this would be the curriculum that I wrote with Dr. Mary Gleason and Vicki Vachon on rewards, because we wanted to optimize the students' ability to read multisyllabic words. And basically these three categories I just went through, that's critical content, it's broken down, and it's sequenced logically, was how we designed that instruction. So let's just look at that. And first of all, is it critical content? Well, just this week, the Institute of Educational Science put out a new practice guide about providing reading interventions for students in 4th through 9th grade. So many of us are involved with this. And so I'm going to, when the PowerPoint goes out, we'll also send you the link to the IESE practice guide. But here was what the practice guide said, that number 1 recommendation is we teach students how to read multisyllabic words. Well, you can believe that there was a little celebration in Archerland that the materials that we've written in rewards matched the first recommendation with a strong research base. Many of the studies utilize rewards in their research. This guide is so important to so many of your roles that I'm going to dedicate our next webinar to it. And so that I can talk to you about each part of it and how they might be implemented in intervention. That will be on May 10th. The last slide in this presentation announces that. So it's going to be on this IES practice guide, but you'll have it beforehand and you will have read it because it fits with so many of your professional work. Okay, so the first thing is we focus on critical content. Number 2, so critical content in rewards, we teach students how to attack multisyllabic words and circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowels, say the parts, re, con, struck, shun, say the whole word, reconstruction, and make it a real word based on words you've heard or said. And so even a long word, circle the prefix un, circle the prefix con, circle the suffix a t, circle the suffix ol, circle the suffix shun, underline the vowel sound eh, say the parts unconventionality, unconventionality. All right, so this is what we wanted to teach, but we had to follow the other guidelines to really enhance the intrinsic load of what students are going to learn, optimizing it for children, and it's breaking it down. So even that simple strategy, circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowel sound, say the parts, say the whole word and make it a real word. To that, you have to know vowel combinations because every syllable has a vowel. You have to know the sound and name for single vowel letters. You have to be able to read parts of real words like ploy and skate. You have to be able to identify the vowels within a word to know how many syllables or parts. You have to be able to orally blend these syllables into words. And maybe you're close. Maybe you read hotel, hotel, and it should be hotel. You've got to change it to go with the context. You have to be able to identify prefixes and suffixes. You have to be able to identify them in words by circling the prefix and suffixes. You have to know the meanings of prefixes and suffixes. Whoa. So we can't just teach the whole thing. We have got to break it down and teach these parts. And each one of these becomes a strand that we teach. So I just opened up my own curriculum material and wrote down the sequence of teaching prefixes, then suffixes. And so you see that this is in one lesson. They're all ones that are easy to pronounce as they're closed syllables. And then here we have ones, except for that one, that are closed syllables and so forth. So to make a program that could teach students well how to read multisyllabic words in 4th through 9th grade, we had to know that that was critical content, break it down, and then for each of those skills, have them logically sequenced for instruction. That's how explicit instruction, really good curriculum, support and optimize the intrinsic load, what you are learning. But let's just look at a few other examples. And so I was working with a teacher on teaching fractions. We looked at the sequence in the book, and we added some other steps. This is for middle school 6th and 7th graders. And so we taught them how to write decimals as fractions. Then how to write decimals as fractions and mixed numbers. Then we taught them how to write fractions as decimals, write fractions and mixed numbers as decimals, then write percentages as fractions, write fractions as percentages, and write percentages as decimals, because this is all about the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents. Break it down into smaller components that are obtainable. Another example is in content area. I'm teaching you branches of the federal government. Oh, do I love teaching social studies. What are the 3 branches? What are their functions? How would we compare and contrast their functions? What are the limits of each branch of the government? Oh my goodness, that could go on for a moment. And how do we reach a balance of power? But see, even there, the social studies teacher has to think, how can I break it down into obtainable components? You know how much I love the writing revolution as a source in the area of writing. And so we have a teacher here from Alaska, and I was doing a whole webinar series on use of a book study, really, of writing revolution. And I wrote down the sequences that are used in this case to teach a paragraph. So broken down into small components. I can write a topic sentence, a sentence that expresses the paragraph's main idea and is supported by detailed sentences. But all of these steps were to lead to writing a topic sentence. Then I can write a topic sentence when given a list of past paragraph details. I'm not going to write the whole paragraph, but I can write the topic sentence, and I can write a concluding sentence. Then give me a plan and I can write a paragraph. Then I can, given a plan, write the topic sentence and conclusion and the body of it. And then finally, I can, given a topic, list the details, select the most important ones, order them. Then I can create a concluding sentence and a topic sentence, and I can write a well-organized, informative paragraph. But notice that isn't one day. This is over time, so that I don't have cognitive overload. All right. So what else could we do? If I want you to learn something, I'm going to have critical content. I am going to break it down into obtainable pieces. I am going to sequence them systematically. And in some cases, I could optimize it by pre-teaching. I know that every one of you has your teachers pre-teach vocabulary before they read a passage, pre-teach knowledge before they read a passage. I know that you might teach them the characters in a story. You might teach them a timeline before you go to discuss an event. All of these are suggestions in this book, and all of them are ones you already do. Let's just look at some examples. So I was working with math teachers. And what we did is for each of the units, we wrote down the vocabulary the students would need to be able to read the explanations in the math book. And I said to the teachers, this is middle school, I said, now what I want you to do is decide of that vocabulary, which ones you want to pre-teach. And so This came directly from their book. And they said, well, given this, we had better teach these 3 concepts. And I said, well, now that means that they're going to be pre-taught it, but they're also going to read it in their book and have the definitions there too. And one teacher said, well, that's fine. More than one repetition is going to increase the probability that they learn it. And I loved that, because so many teachers say, well, if it's in the book, I shouldn't pre-teach it. But I always go back to Graham Nuthall's book, summarizing his research in New Zealand, which found if you want students to retain knowledge, they need 3 complete rehearsals of that information. So I pre-teach that vocabulary. We read about that vocabulary. You keep a log with that vocabulary. You study it for a vocabulary test. 3 total exposures. In case you want to follow up, Graham Nuthall. Okay, so remember the article that I used on Panama Canal, because I've used it occasionally in teaching how to teach informational text. So I went back and looked at the pre-teaching I did, and I said, when I sat down with the teachers and said, what do the students need to know in order to understand this passage that we should teach in advance? And this was their list. Like, where is Panama? Whether you are from Alaska or Texas, Hawaii, or Oregon, there's a high probability that not everyone will know where is Panama. What is a canal? They may not have that knowledge. And why was Panama chosen to have a canal between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans? Because it's only 56 miles wide. And when was it constructed? Late 1800s till 1914. What are locks? Not just a lock on a door. What are locks? And why is Panama Canal important? So we pre-taught this. And so that the students would have no cognitive overload when they went to read it. They would have more knowledge that they brought there. So a very good explanation for why we pre-teach vocabulary and pre-teach knowledge is to reduce the probability of cognitive overload. Well, so in his book, one of the examples that he gives, Orville Lovell gives for, and the original researcher Sweller used, was having concept or character maps. And so I decided, okay, and his was on Macbeth. And I said, I wonder if anybody else has done it on Macbeth. Look at Cliff Notes. You go online, because remember, the environment also has external information. So I typed in character map, Macbeth, boom, look at that beautiful thing. Now, think about this when you're in high school reading Macbeth. Wouldn't you like to know, okay, he was a great warrior, later King of Scotland, and these are all the relationships as we read the story. And if I forget, I can always look at my character map. Okay, there arranges the murder of, okay. And so it shows the relationships in the lines here. So I was recently reading, once again, Lord of the Rings. And I said, I wonder if there's one for that. There it was. But think about this. I would do this from 3rd grade on if the students are reading a narrative, is give them beforehand the relationship of the characters, particularly as they get more complex as we go through middle school and high school, which would make it much easier to read and understand it. So something we can do. Another suggestion he makes, which is so wise, is to give students timelines. So you say to them, we are going to be talking about the period of time in 1929 called the Great Depression. And so let's just look what's happened. It is after the end of World War I. but before World War II. And so this period in the 1920s called what? The Great Depression. Given that some students are confused about little things, big things actually, about, which came first, the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. That would tell us that they would really benefit constantly by having a pre-teach of a timeline to get these things in order. So through the curriculum, we can make a difference in terms of students' ability to process information. And we already have those major pieces within our repertoire. Teach critical content, break it down, sequence it logically, and then pre-teach information that would be helpful. All of that would optimize the intrinsic load. All right, minimize extraneous load. Now, there's so many things that could take students' attention away, and I want you to help me out on this. I want you to pretend you're teaching a lesson, and what are some of the kinds of things that could take students' attention away? Pop those in the chat box for me. What you would perceive as something that could take students' attention away from what you want them to focus on. Okay, so let's just take a look at what some of you came up with. Hi, Kim Newton, my friend. You said it's even possible that the educational technology tools that we're using might take their attention away. And Alice suggested, let's see, and well, actually, forgive me, Kim, your answer was a neighbor, a partner could, and it also could, a poster, Alice said, could take their attention away. Mickey said things in their hands, you've all taught. Digressions when a student comment is made. Now, Lori, I've seen that quite a bit, particularly if the teacher doesn't start by teaching, but asking. And so the teacher asks, does anyone know what the word digression means? And students give their input, and that takes the attention away from it as the teacher tries to drag them back to the critical content. So digressions certainly can do that, and it can be other digressions. I was sort of in error today by telling you it was my 75th birthday, but it is, but that's a digression unrelated to the content. Oh my goodness, Archer. And Kim suggested from that, maybe they have thinking about a fight with a friend. Carol from California, good to see you, said maybe it is hunger. Alice says, ooh, maybe the teacher's talking too much. Hope I'm not doing that today. And Lori said, the way in which you're asking students to share their responses could take their attention away. And too much hanging in the room. And so, yes, that, particularly if it is on the front of the room and they're supposed to be looking at the screen or board. And it could be a PowerPoint with a lot of writing on it. Too many steps to remember. Excellent. Parents fighting the night before. You're right. So many, many things. Now, some of these we can't control at all. I cannot control the fact that your parents fought last night and you are still thinking about that. But I can control the number of steps you have to learn. I can control the amount of words that are on the PowerPoint. I could control the amount of, if I'm talking too much. I could be certain that you're signed up for early breakfast in the morning so we could remove hunger. So some of them are ones we can take care of and others we can't, but we need to be aware of them. And so much of it is related to how we teach. And is our teaching and our design of our lesson going to reduce your ability to learn new information? Okay, so when I looked at this, I said to myself, well, again, so much of what are the elements of explicit instruction that relates to how we teach are designed to reduce any extraneous load that could instead go to the content that we are teaching. So design organized and focused lessons, keeping it on topic with no irrelevant digressions. So you are right on that the lessons, and we talk about the opening of a lesson, we talk about the closing of the lesson, all of it directed to what you are learning, what you are learning, what you are learning. And we provide not discovery, but explicit instruction. That is intentional, that is direct, that is explicit. So explicit instruction basically is designed to minimize what is extraneous, so that cognitive energy could be placed on what is essential. We tell students what we're going to learn so that the teacher's focused on the goal, that the students are focused on the goal. Now, as I read this book and picked out just the things that would be relevant to you, just exactly what any teacher should do, I like this idea of the bulletproof definitions. I started with one at the beginning. It was a big idea. And this was another one. I thought this would be very useful for you who work with particularly content area teachers at the middle school or high school. So here's an example from this book, but it's also, you could go online and there's many examples. And let's say the history lesson is analyzing the causes of the Cold War, and keep the kids totally focused to what was most essential. We could have a bulletproof definition. I love this. The Cold War, it means the teachers take the time to think as what is the kernels I really, really, really want you to learn. Very much like a goal or objective. The Cold War was, of course, need'll have to fix that up, was a period of tense competition from 1947 to 1991 between the United States and the Soviet Union without direct war between the two powers. Okay, so then the teacher introduces that and keeps going back to it as they learn more and more. So we still remember that this was a period of time, the end of World War II to 1991, when the United States and the Soviet Union, without going to war, were very competitive. Okay, well, we can go back and review all prior knowledge or skills that they need for this lesson. Another one of our elements of explicit instruction, we can provide step-by-step demonstrations. So I'm not going to just tell you how to figure out multisyllabic words. I'm going to say, watch me. I'm going to guide you. What do we do first? Circle the prefix. What do we do next? Circle the suffix. What do we next? Underline the vowels. Then we say the parts. We say it fast. We make it a real word. I'm going to guide you in doing that. And I'm going to have clarity, 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 so that you will get it. Recently, I did a demonstration lesson online because I'm not yet traveling the world. The teacher afterwards said, "Oh my God, Archer, they got it." Well, that is like the big idea that I have clarity so they will get it. And then we broke that down to teaching 3 different things: teaching a strategy, demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. I do it, we do it, you do it. We talked about teaching knowledge, where they have to attend to the information you're presenting. They have to intend to learn it. They have to rehearse it, and they have to retrieve it. And we talked about teaching vocabulary. They can pronounce the word. We introduce the meaning. We give them examples, and we check their understanding. So all of this, the structure of how we design the lessons directly minimizes extraneous information so that it's totally focused on what is most critical. Now, interesting enough, they didn't talk about delivery. So to reflect their look at it, they looked at basically design elements, but not delivery elements. But we know delivery makes a difference. Are the students making lots of responses? Are they getting feedback? Are they getting corrections? Are we having a perky pace? Are we monitoring them? So I have to tell you, if I want students to focus on the learning, I'm going to have to use great design and delivery. And one thing that I really noticed as I watched these videos is that teachers who minimize extraneous information by using routines make the most difference. Like if they're introducing one vocabulary word, they introduce all 3 of them with the same routine. If they're doing spelling dictation, they use a routine on the first word, same as the second, the third, and the fourth. If they are teaching the steps in analyzing a story problem, what I saw last week, beautifully done, they're going to use the same steps in analyzing the story problems. What did it tell us? We underline it. We underline it. Do we have any extraneous information we don't need? We cross it out. And then we circle what we need to find. So they had this and they analyzed 1 problem, 2 problem, 3 problem, 4. Routines, routines, routines. So going back here, my point was, explicit instruction is definitely supported by the research on memory. And because it is directly designed to optimize the focus on what we want the students to learn and to minimize other things that could take their attention away. Now I'm going to end here with, we're not going to end yet, but I'm going to end with another non-example. I had a teacher who was just totally delightful, energetic, enthusiastic, great student-teacher relationship, just, oh my goodness, lovely. And she designed an example lesson where the students were going to review vocabulary. And she decided that what they needed was more fun. They needed a game to go with it. And so she designed a game where the students were in teams of 4, and this was in 4th grade, teams of 4, and she would put up on the screen a word, and they were to talk over with the partner what the word meant. and come to a conclusion that they agreed on what it meant. And then they were to point to one of the four to be what's called the runner in the game, who would run up to the teacher who was at the screen, and the first one who got there would give the meaning of the word. And if it was right, they would get points. Okay, thinking, oh, what we need is more fun. We need more movement. We need more activity. Okay, so she puts up the first word and the students talk it over. They point and a runner runs up and the runner tells the meaning of it and they get points. The runner goes back to the seat and there's a few other runners that have come up, but they don't have to say the meaning. So then the teacher says, okay, here's the next word. And I watched the group. At this point, they're supposed to talk it over and come up with the meaning and rehearse the meaning of the word. But 3 out of the 4 teams sent runners right away. And so they were running up, trying to get there before the other runners to tell the teacher. And so the next runner got up there and said, oh, I don't know the meaning of it. Oh, okay, go back to your seat. Next person, no, go back to your seat. Next person, and that person knew the meaning. Okay, you got points for your team, go back. Well, on the third word, the students were not even talking at all with their group. They just, as soon as the teacher put up the word, one kid ran up there and none of them knew the meaning of the word. So, that's where that extraneous load totally took their attention away from what they were to learn, which was the meanings of the word. And the teacher afterwards said, oh, so because I had a lot of extraneous things, like they had to look at the screen and then they had to get a runner and then they had to run up and they got points. They're trying to get more points so they win the game. And they're standing up and cheering the runner to run faster. And that took their attention away from the vocabulary. And I said, yep. And she said, but I thought, a game would be nice. I said, well, then think of a game that has none of that involved. So, for example, here's a word you've learned. And I'm going to put up 4 definitions, and you're going to pick the one that you believe goes with the word and put it on your whiteboard. And everybody hold it up. And this is the correct answer. Number 2, and if you got it right, on your whiteboard in the corner, put 1 tally mark. Now let's talk about that definition. And she said, oh, so the kids still are sort of in game land? Yes, but the game is not taking their attention away from the critical content. That's why this was useful to you, is every time you watch a teacher, be really aware of what through the actual extraneous information is drawing their attention away. All right, I want you to honor me by putting something in the chat box that you thought was useful today that you might be able to use within your own work. So everybody is writing in the chat box, and you don't have to write the whole sentence, but this is one takeaway from the webinar. And if you will add that, and then we will look at your takeaways. I'm just going to put this up so you have it in your mind. And I would love it if you would all open up your own cameras as we go through what you thought was useful. So cameras open so you can see other people who are working at the district level or state level or curriculum level in the area of explicit instruction. Wave to everyone. Okay. And What a total delight to have you here. And so as I open up the chat, to many of you, here is Marilyn Sprick, who is with Safe and Civil Schools and Cora Books. Wonderful good friend of mine. Nick is our technology person who arranges all of our events. So let's just see what were our takeaways. And 10 new messages. Okay, go there, Archer. So the bulletproof definitions. Oh, I'm definitely following up that and revising some of my own work and doing that. And Carol said the use of timelines and character maps. Think about, I think all the novels that we get should come with a little character map before we start reading it. There would be like hope. Judith said, I just can't get my cursor in the right place. Let me try one more thing. Don't you hate it? Let me see if I can get my cursor here. Yes. All right. Judith said, using the bulletproof definitions, they were a big seller here. Thanks for pointing out where our use of explicit instruction, we are optimizing intrinsic load. The idea of not exceeding working memory. Excellent, Mickey. We can plan for our students' working memories, absolutely, and our own as teachers. Another idea, let me just get, again, my cursor is having a hard time helping me out here. So Marilyn said, thank you always, my friend. We've had parallel careers, my friend, Marilyn Sprick. Both of us write curriculum. She's got great curriculum for struggling students and for primary students. And I think that is it. So a total delight to have you here. Just such good people. Kim Newton, so glad to see you. Would you stay after for a moment? I want to catch up. May all of you have a glorious day, and may we have peace in our world.
Thank you.
Thank you.